Is everybody on? Go ahead. All right, we're going to start, if we can, the Finance Committee meeting. You want to give us a roll call?
Frank Facciano.
Present.
Paul Anthony.
Here.
Robert Brooks.
Here.
John Hayes. Ron Heckman. Larry Hemberger.
I see him.
And Mike Stershik.
He's here.
We have a
Mike's here.
quorum.
I think John said he's zooming in.
He's on another board meeting this morning, so.
All right. Well, welcome. Is there any public comment?
No, sir.
Okay. And we'll go right to the action items. We're going to approve the minutes from the October meeting. No motion for that. Paul? Second. Mike?
I guess. I wasn't there, so.
And then all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So that's approved. We're going to see the financial statements. It's you, Todd.
Good morning, everybody.
Morning.
Go through the financials, pretty much the same format that we usually use. Always start off with the traffic. You see in October, we're about a little bit more than 1% above where we were in October of 2019. Year to date, we've actually surpassed 2019, and that's kind of been our benchmark year as far as getting back to where we were before the pandemic. You can see most of that is driven by Allegiant. They're up 58% since 2019. United's pretty close to where they were, and obviously Delta and American are lagging behind there. This is just showing you where we are year to date and how we've surpassed previous 2019 high. So we're in new territory. Here we're talking about benchmarking throughput, and this is actually number of operations at the airport. Passenger operations, we're pretty close to what's going on in the rest of the airports. We're at minus 3.8 versus 3.5. Seats, we're down a little bit, and these are available seats. So that's not passengers, because traffic is up, that's available seats. So available seats are down 4.4 compared to the industry at 2.3. If anybody has any questions, by all means.
What's
please.
missing out of available seats? They're down.
Well, that would mean the seats that are available for people to,
Less flights?
it could be less flights. Right.
Less frequencies.
So to put that in perspective, we've had a higher load factor now because our traffic is up, but we have less seats. And comparing them to our peers, again, I know Frank asked me the question, and I said I got to check with Darren on that. Why is White Plains so much better?
Throughput-wise,
No, yes, throughput-wise and seats-wise.
they added, Breeze has started flying out of there recently, I believe it was. They've added an airline there. That is, I would have to look at it more closely, but that'd be my initial thought.
But you can see the rest of the folks are kind of in that minus 22, minus 23 range. And if you think about it, that's where we were on American and Delta. So without the resurgence of Allegiant, we might be in this same kind of category here. Always look at the month. Again, we expected the month to be not a positive one as far as income. We had a really good month as far as net income. Revenue was up. We did get some additional FEMA reimbursements that we did not have budgeted, and that's thanks to one of Steve's managers, Jennifer, has been really instrumental in getting us some extra FEMA reimbursements. So we got $24,000 of reimbursements for FEMA, for CARES that we did not have budgeted, so that was good for us. Overall net income was up, and again, a lot of that driven by traffic returning to 2019 levels that we didn't expect early on, or should I say last year when we did the budget. Again, year to date, almost 6.6 in net income, 3.8 without the CARES, and that's a pretty favorable number to budget, 4.7 versus budget. Again, there's a couple of things, we had all those hires in there, and I'll talk about that before. before that we haven't done, and revenue is obviously at a level that we didn't expect when we did our budget last year. You can see at the bottom there, overall expenses, a lot of that is on the personnel side, but you're starting to see some of that change, and I'll talk about that a little bit more. But again, it's revenue driven, and that's always a good thing when we got more revenue. And this is just one we added in, because one of John's questions yesterday, he wanted to know where we were for our forecast. Our forecast is about net income of 5.1. We expect some back-end expenses that were budgeted earlier in the year that are going to hit later. For example, we have some of that demolition actually should be $375K that we expect in November and December that we had budgeted earlier in the year. And it's just we have CARES in our original money that we are postponing to next year. So that's a big part of that difference. But again, overall favorable to budget. So again, that's just kind of our that's kind of our projection of where we are, where we think we're going to be for the end of the year. And you can see that number there, that 54, call it $55,000 is our projected actual cost per day for cost. Different than budget, that's what our actual cost is projected at this point. Always break down all the categories. I don't want anybody to think I forgot any. I like my all else category, but I put them all in there. Parking, obviously, at the top there. CARES is right behind there. And you can see that those two make up pretty much most of our overall net income. And then we have some of the other ones in there as well. Again, like I said earlier, big part of that is the salary, wages, and benefits, just because of, we had full staffing from day one at the beginning of the year, and we've slowly gotten there, but you can see that's been a big variance. And then we had some of the aviation services revenue, excluding the icing, parking revenue. So those are really what's making up that big portion of that year-to-date budget variance there. Then you can look at personnel costs and all other non-personnel costs, kind of what's going on there. You can see year-to-date we're down about 12%. That's making up that big number. It's slowly going down. You can see in October it was a -10. That non-personnel number is something to keep an eye on as you start to see the impact of inflation, particularly as we go into the warmer, or should I say colder months, when we start to see the utility bills really hit us hard. Because you can see we were favorable, we were starting to go into the red as well. This is our cash flow, and this really kind of goes into our budget. Some of these numbers that have changed are really our budgeted numbers as we see changed that we'll be talking about after I do this presentation on the financials. Again, you see the changes and all that's just really a function of the latest changes on our budgets. Grants and receipts are always something that changes. I was talking to Paul about some of the questions, and we were talking about RACP and the long delay in getting some of that money. So it's a good thing we have some of that bridge financing, because it's certainly not something you get in a month or two. Okay, but you can see, it's one of those ones there that CARES there, 24, is a lot of that's pushing back some of the money we have for this year into next year.
Yeah. Todd, can you just explain the lease payments on that slide?
Okay, sure.
That obviously,
Go back.
it tapers off, to like April.
So lease payments are capital leases. So they are payments that we make for equipment.
Oh, okay.
And we have some stuff for our energy stuff, some of that stuff we financed through capital leases. They're not technically debt service, but they're capital leases. Like, for example, some of our trucks, some of our vehicles, some of our bigger stuff. So that's always part of the CIP, because this is another way for us to finance some of our capital needs, not of our big ones like our connector, but trucks. And,
Thank you.
Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
We still have the not new properties on there. At some point, Darren's going to negotiate that down, and it's only going to be $400,000 because he's the king negotiator. But we still have you can see down there. I think I said it was $55,000 what we're projecting for this year. We had a budget of about $59,000, so you can see we're not quite at what we budgeted, but you can see next year's number is a big number of almost more than $10,000 more. And we'll talk about that a little bit more as we go into the budget. And you can see there some of the numbers that have changed just for people, you know, because I know for some folks, this is your first budget presentation as we go into next month. But see that contingency reserve there, that number 29, that is 5% of operating expenses. That's just something we put in there to give us some cushion. That reserve for future debt service is at, I believe it's 97,000 now. It was 75, but because interest rates have went up, it's now 97,000, and that is for the connector. Just kind of us saying, hey, at some point we're going to have to pay this full amount, and then it actually drops off in July because that's when we actually make an actual full payment on it. But that's just kind of us saying, hey, let's pretend like we have to pay that because we want to make sure we're ready to handle that cash. It's not a real expense, but at some point, obviously, it will be. Any questions? I go to the next one. On cash flow, again, you can see where we are now. We just used the number for 2023. This is where we expect to be. That black line, again, is the 60 days cash on hand, and we never want to get below. I mean, there were days, I think I've mentioned this before, we're at 3 days cash on hand. Not exactly ideal, and that is actually after reserves and contingencies. That's 60-day cash on hand. So that's kind of our low point, but obviously we've got some cushion there as well. Any questions? Okay. I'll stand up here because I know I got to do the budget soon. So
We
Make a
want
motion.
to, thank you, Mike, for accepting,
And I'll second that.
and Paul seconding, all in favor.
Aye. Aye.
Accepted. Moving on to the operating budget.
before I even get started on the budget, I want to acknowledge the hard work of Shane and Karen and the rest of the finance team. They've been in a lot of hard work to get this budget done. We don't have a separate budget team, so they jump in and do their regular responsibilities and the budget. So I want to make sure I give them a shout out and the rest of the team for their hard work. So start off with the budget here. What do I need to do? And again, a lot of this is going to be a little bit repetitive from last month. We just kind of followed up again. Again, none of this stuff is rocket science. You think about our vision is to be financially responsible, strategic, and manage expectations. And manage expectations is the one where people get a little, have a little questions about. And that's really, you know, we have to make sure people understand where we are with revenue and what we can do and what we can't do. And we always have more needs than we have money. So that's why it's always important to manage expectation because we have to keep it in check. Really. I'll power it off and then power it back on. There we go. Now I gotta go back now. Okay, the goals, again, manage resources, again, all this stuff is stuff we talked about last month. Obviously, we have to meet our debt service requirements, and we want to continue investing in our future. If we're not investing, we're dying. We got to invest in our organization, our people, and obviously our infrastructure. And the last one there, you know, if you remember when we did the previous budgets, it was like, hey, we're going to use CARES up until when we get back to full 2019 levels. Well, we're back at 2019 levels. But unfortunately, inflation has hit us hard, and we're using a lot of that CARES money to kind of offset some of these inflationary costs that are pretty significant. Again, we talked about this last month. You can see for number one, we're talking about a balanced budget, you know, about 2.1 million with CARES, a negative 2 million without CARES. That's why we're still relying on CARES at this point. You kind of go through where we were in previous years. If you go down to 2019, so you can see, you know, we don't usually have a ton of net income. We just try to really cover what we need to cover. We're not trying to make a ton of money. Whatever extra money we make, we invest in our organization. But you can see even in 2020, before COVID, you know, we're not showing $100 million of net income. We're just trying to make sure we cover what we need to cover. And then you can see what happened in 2021 and some of the things that have happened since then. And kind of the point that Paul brought up earlier, you can see that item in there, number 2 there, the capital leases, which is a very interesting question. So the debt service requirement is 1.25. So that means that we have to have 25% more in revenue than what our debt service is. So if our debt service is $1, we need $1.25 of revenue to be able to cover it. And the covenant, it's an old covenant, says it really talks about debt service. Before there was truly capital leases, they were really popular. But if you include them, which in the spirit of what it's meant to be, we would be at 1.26. So a lot closer to that 1.25 than a 1.7 kind of indicates. Obviously, we're hoping that there won't be any more COVID or any other kind of shutdowns, because that obviously would impact us significantly. And a lot of stuff is just based on our latest estimates and stuff that we talked about before, and always trying to balance, those three things. We talk about people, operations, and infrastructure. Again, this is the stuff we talked about last month. None of these assumptions have really changed. It's just kind of talking about where we were as far as passenger flights. You can see we expect those numbers to actually go up. That's just based on our latest estimates. And even on the next one, you can see that our employments are expected to be up. But again, you can see that big reliance on Allegiant. Over half of our traffic relying on Allegiant. Going down, you can see most of the stuff is really trying to get more revenue, more things going. You can see down there, number 11, we talked about the parking rates. And that's just a placeholder we put in the budget of 5%. It won't be 5% across the board. We're looking at the dynamics of what that be, but it'll be at least 5%. It was at an event last week, and one of the folks said, it's time for you guys to raise those parking rates. They're pretty cheap. I'm like, okay, thank you. And again, we may increase Uber and Lyft as well. We haven't done anything since the pandemic to them either. But again, the budget doesn't assume those increases. So, that's just something that would be extra revenue if we do that, above those numbers. And we talked about these FTEs.
Can I stop you for a second?
Yes.
What do you mean Uber and Lyft rates? Like, how do you charge them to
They
come
charge
in?
them for drop-offs.
Yeah.
Interesting.
You can't come in our airport and not pay.
Fair enough.
We'll take your money now.
Well, if you use Uber and Lyft, they actually have a charge built in there for picking up the
they
airport.
just pass
It's
it along.
right on there.
Got it.
So you can see that we talked about this before. FTEs, again, full-time equivalents, but full-time employees, everybody gets their head around. You can see down there, 132 in 19, and we're throwing 30 more in 2023. You can see the increase in total employees. But again, it really is, when we start to figure out where we're going to be, it's going to be, if we're at full staffing, some of these variances that we've had are going to go away because they won't be there. We've been fortunate that I shouldn't say fortunate, we've used that, resources, but again, you can't expect it to be there forever because at some point you do expect to get to full staffing. This is some of the big variances. I know we've had some of these questions before, and this kind of where those variances are. It's basically FTEs here because it's hard to break them down by full time. But you can see that the bulk of them are these departments here: maintenance, RF, and RF, for example, is one. Those positions haven't even been posted yet. But those are for going to the new schedule. We're going to have to add more people. So we talked about changing the schedule for them in the new year. That we have to add more people to accommodate the schedule. Some of the other ones that are out there is posted. Maintenance one has been a challenge for us with some of those skilled positions, but we are doing our best to get them in here. Wages, I know everybody focused on wages, and we talk about them, but these are all the union ones are per the contracts, period. That's what's in the contracts. The non-union one is the only one that's tentative, and that's what we had talked about before, that, we did one for, I think it was 9/7, I believe the date was. We did that 3% then. This one is, and again, that's really to combat the impact of inflation. These would mainly be for people that haven't gotten adjustments because of what's going on with the market, and I'll talk about that in a little bit more. But again, that's that's really based on, the non-union one, because there's a non-contract, is something that, it really going to depend on how the first half results go and whether or not we're able to do that. Shift, everything's all based on the CBAs. There's your number there, Mike. I know you like it. It used to be 300, now it's 320. Again, we always have 32 inches of snow. Again, for us, one of the challenges is more events is more costly. And to some extent, more events is more costly because you get that when we're more. So it's better for us to have one or two big events as opposed to a lot of little ones because of what we have to do to maintain the. Well, I don't know if you're choking the yard there.
Yeah, all right, you just said
Assuming you
one or
don't mean
two
like
big
a
events.
Buffalo event?
No. I didn't mean that much. I mean,
Tom's joking.
I'm sweating over here, Todd.
not that much.
All right.
All insurance and everything are per our renewals.
We get you a shovel, Paul.
Again,
Yeah.
Snow blower?
there you go. We're going to continue to qualify how deductible. Everything else is per the plan designs, the contribution rates, and everybody's contributions are in that 6 to 7% range. They're all in there of overall cost. Few tenths of a percent different, but they're all pretty much the same. And we always base new employees off of employee and child. It's just kind of a budgeting thing. You can assume that they're all family, or you can assume they're all single, which is obviously too conservative, so we do employee and child. And that 2% is a placeholder. We don't encumber, so we just put that aside, and if we pay it, we pay it. And normally our unemployment is less than 2%, but that's just a placeholder we put in the budget. So it's not something that if we pay to anybody, we're self-funded, but normally we don't pay 2%. It's not 2%. But when we do, that's what we put in there. And then, our workman's comp renewal and some of our other renewals as far as insurance are 11/1 for the property and casualty and a lot of that stuff. The biggest one is obviously workman's comp, and we're assuming no increase for those last 2 months because obviously that's for next year. I just have to assume that there's no increase on that number. We've got enough increases. I think that one, hopefully we won't have any more. Again, I know I talked about this a little bit before. Because of the way we do our self-funding, we pay the full amount, and then the surplus comes in the following year. We budgeted $60,000 in surplus. Through July, we had a $75,000 surplus, so maybe that'll be a little bit better. That'll help us out next year. But again, that's just how we do it as far as managing. Again, we pay the full amount, and then when we get their money back the following year based on the experience, that shows us a negative expense in that following year. Pension, and that 1% placeholder, I know we had some conversations about that bonus pool. That's just a placeholder in there. It's not one, everybody doesn't get 1%. It's usually something much more static, but that's just a placeholder. It really depends on how we do overall as an organization. If we have a better year, it's more like COVID, we obviously couldn't do anything. And this is kind of comparing it, the budgets to last year's budget or this year's budget, I guess. You can see we're up pretty good on the revenues. You can see that our cost of sales and some of that's personnel, and I'll talk about that a little bit more. But some of that's just fuel and de-icing. That's up 40% there. So, revenue. When you think about more revenue, that's cost right there. 40% more in fuel, de-icing, and the labor for those cost of sales.
Back.
Yes. Did you have a question?
So advertising, I know it's a low number, but it went up a little bit on the other slide. That's what you expect from the new
Yeah.
terminal?
Some of it's the new terminal, some of it's stuff that we've added since last year's budget too.
And you see the big sign that we got out there?
I was gonna say, the big punch me in the face sign.
Yeah.
That was one that wasn't budgeted, so that's.
That's not advertising.
Yeah, that is
Oh,
advertising.
no, not the signs coming in, are you talking about?
Yeah, the entrance.
Those are.
No, not those. I'm talking about the big.
The first common
common
on
vote.
the side of the building.
Credit union sign on the side of the building.
I'll look for
Frank, you
that
saw
when I
it,
go
yeah,
out.
just say you saw it.
I don't know how you didn't see it.
I was
Tell him, Frank. Tell him you saw it. Frank, you saw it.
by the entrance sign.
Tell him.
Frank, you're at the chamber, you saw it.
Oh, wow.
I'll look though. All right.
You can see what's going on some of our expenses. Our expenses are going up 15.2. And you can see what's going on here overall. see what's going on here. And again, this is just kind of, if you get to the bottom line here, you can really see that the net income is relatively close to what it was this year's budget, but obviously we're using a little bit more CARES. You know, we're using about 300, a little bit more than 300,000 more in CARES in this year's budget than in last year's budget, or should I say 2023's budget versus 2022. And one of the things that's on there, and I'll talk about that a little bit.
Hey, Todd,
Yeah.
I think I need to go, well, I need to go back to the other airports on the
Yeah.
expense side. Like if I'm looking at it, that's a 100% increase.
Yep.
From prior year.
Mhm. The biggest change on there, and if you drill down, is the allocation of expenses. That we had to change those allocations based on hours that are actually in those particular airports. So it's, you know, the administration costs, we have a lot of costs that are allocated. You think about police costs, you think about ARF costs, you think about administration costs, HR costs, et cetera, we allocate them, and the latest allocations show that those Queen City and Braden should get a lot more allocations. Braden's is a little less, I think we kept it static because they don't have as many employees as what we talked about before. But that's just really allocation. So overall, it doesn't change the direct cost, it just changes how much of our cost here we're charging to those that should be charged to Queen City and or Braden.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
Great question, thank you. Then breaking down, you know, our revenue. So if you look at our total revenue, including Queen City and Braden, you have a little over $42 million of revenue, and what do we do with it? Well, where does it go? You know, 32% of it is going to just salary and wages. 16% is going to employee benefits, and then all of our other expenses are 29%. Then what's left we're going to use for debt service, not debt service coverage, lease payments we talked about earlier, and then whatever's left we use for infrastructure, and that includes the CARES money in there. So you can see that every dollar is accounted for. There's nothing left that goes in anybody's pocket. It's really, if there's anything left, we spend it on infrastructure. And Steve, we got a lot of infrastructure needs, don't we? You know, we got a lot more than we have money. So again, that's a breakdown. And then if you're forgetting what infrastructure, major infrastructure we have is the connector, and obviously we're still working on the runway. This is just our cash flow, this kind of breaking out. You kind of saw it earlier when we broke it down before, and this is just breaking them down by quarter. And one of the things I talked about was the connector numbers. You can start to see what happens on those numbers, that they start to go up once you get into May and May going forward, because they start to pick up those connector loans. Again, same things we talked about before, just in a slightly different format. You can see all the CARES down there. Can't see it all there. Breaking it down, again, that's 69 versus where we were this year. You can see, like I was saying before, when line 30, that there's no reserve for future debt service once you get to July in there, because obviously we're paying the full amount. And this is just kind of a breakdown of why our costs are going up. So, you know, if you compare it to 19, which again is our benchmark year, you're going from 2023 to 2018, 32% increase in revenue without CARES. That's what's happened since 2019, so that's a great number. But if you look at the expenses, they went up significantly as well, 45%. 62% of that is personnel. 39% of that is infrastructure. And then you get into non-personnel costs, and a lot of that is, you know, when I talk about non-personnel costs of sales, that's materials, fuel, and that's not even counting the cost that we use internally for some of our fuel and some of our stuff to run our equipment. And then you can see, you know, some of the other highlights there. Training and seminars is something that we don't want to skimp on. That is something that we really want to invest in our employees there. But you can see it went down there. It's really because the floor has been lifted. So before, in 2019, we had 38% of our employees made below $15 an hour. Now, nobody makes below $15 an hour. And we're not saying it's a bad thing, we're just saying there's costs, and hopefully at some point we'll be able to pass on these costs, because if not, we're gonna be in trouble. And you can kind of see what's going on here in our rates, and years back, we had, the board had talked about trying to get below $4 on the landing fee to make us more competitive. Well, as you can see, on the top end, without CARES, we would be over $6 on our landing fee because of all the support we're getting from CARES that we put into their rate base. And you can see the terminal rate would be a 65% increase versus a 10% increase that we gave them. And then most of that terminal increase we passed on was mainly because of the connector. If we didn't pass on all the other costs, we just passed on the connector costs. And you can see the same thing that happened down there. This is kind of what's going on in the industry. That everybody is kind of trying to hold the rates as best as they can. And it really goes back to what we had done a few years back when we got the CARES money, and everybody said, why don't you take the money all at once? Had we not done that, and we didn't have these CARES, these rates, we would be in trouble, because we wouldn't have the resources to keep their rates low. And one of the things we changed our rates and charges a few years back. Again, that's helping us out. And the wording in this CARES is, if we don't need it, we get to keep it. So that's just maximum support on that rate base. So it's not something we're going to give it to them if they don't need it, because their costs are really, their charges are really cost-based. So if we don't have the cost, then obviously they don't have to pay it. Any questions on that? Okay. And then we always compare ourselves to small non-hub airports in the East region, and you can see why we focus so much on this is just a landing fee as of the end of 2021. We're at 456, and you can see some of the other airports are, and obviously if we're red, nobody's above that $4 range except for us. And this is our competition.
And these are like the Trenton Mercer 70 foot, what is it, 70 cents? 75 cents, they're subsidized by who?
I'm not sure who they're subsidized. No, most of the
subsidy is, do you know,
They are subsidized and we're not, is that?
Yeah,
pretty much
they're
most of the
definitely
airports are
subsidized.
subsidized.
They also don't have a lot of, they're minimal infrastructure. I mean, that's the other thing, that there's not much there.
True.
There's
So landing fee includes cargo though too, right?
Yes, that is
Right,
correct.
so we're a major hub for cargo in and out, so
Correct.
it's our location. Not too much cargo comes out of Atlantic City,
Correct.
Trenton.
Right. And again, it's also the capacity of the airport versus what we have as far as traffic. So we're not fully, we're not using the full capacity of the airport. So if we were, then that cost would obviously go down, because it's a function of the numerator and the denominator. So if we get more traffic, right? Okay, he must have heard me. He likes my presentation. Somebody likes me. But you can see what's going on there. But again, that's part of the reason this connector was so important, because if we can expand the traffic, it obviously makes it easier. And again, there's some efficiencies that we see when we have more capacity. It doesn't always, your costs don't go up directly, but now it's a certain minimum cost that you have to maintain. But as the more you go up, your costs don't go up the same way. And there's the other kind of industry standard, which is cost per plane passenger. You can see that some of the numbers are a little closer, but still we're pretty high except for Charleston. We're second highest there on the list. Because this is the number one thing when we talk about it, when we go to the airlines, they say, well, what's your cost per plane passenger? And, they make money at our airport, which is why they're here. I'm sure we could pass on an extra $10 and nobody would care, but they're conscious of that, and unfortunately, they control that. Any questions? I know I went through a lot. I try to, not make it too boring. There's a lot of information. Again, we're trying to be good stewards of the money. We want the board to really know what's going on. We try to take care of everybody, take care of our infrastructure, do all of our stuff. But we have some challenges that we're going to try to address as we get to, 2020, 2023, and then actually moving into 2024 and beyond. All right. And then I probably, so that, before you, I just want to show that other one, not that, the go ahead, you can take in the, Schedule B.
Exhibit.
Yeah, Exhibit B, just because that's kind of part of the same thing here. And this is just a separate exhibit that's part of the budget. We include this in here. And it's just breaking down the airline costs, the passenger airline costs that they have to pay. So this is kind of, this is a separate chart. It's the same things we talked about. It's just, you know, they're gonna pay $483, that's their cost. You already saw that in the chart. It's just a separate thing that we have to approve separately. So I just wanted to bring that up for everybody. Any questions? It's just kind of putting on paper what we just talked about specifically to the airline. Yes.
When will CARES money disappear?
Well, the plan is for us to, we have after this year, assuming we use all of 2023's money, we would have approximately $3 million left. After, and the plan is to use 2 million in 2024 and then 1 million in 2025. So our whole plan was to kind of slowly move off because you need time to kind of figure these things out. And that's why we did it that way. No, that's, any questions? Okay, thank you.
Right, so we're gonna get a motion to accept the financial statements for presentation to the board, right?
We did that.
We did that one. Operating budget.
We did that. This is, we narrowed to the budget.
Okay,
This is the budget.
so we're approving the operating budget.
We're recommending, are we approving or recommending it to the board?
Approving it, and then we'll obviously take that to the board.
So the finance committee's to approve it.
Yeah, you need to do C and D, just because they're kind of grouped together.
Okay, but we need to do them separately then.
Yes, correct.
I'll make a motion to approve the budget.
Thank you.
I'll second that.
We got Mike and Paul again. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So the budget is approved by the finance committee, and you're gonna present it to the board.
Yep.
And we did Exhibit B. Is that a separate?
No, we do that separately.
Let's do that separately.
All right, so motion.
Somebody else make a motion.
I'll motion Alan for you.
Paul,
I'll second it.
and Mike second. Or,
I'm not on your committee, Frank.
what'd you say?
Sorry.
All in favor?
Aye.
And when we do the presentation to the
That's
board, it'll be a condensed version of this. This is more, because it's a lot of slides. So I don't want you guys falling asleep at the board meeting.
And the CIP?
That's Ryan.
That'll be Ryan, and I think he is connected here somewhere.
Yep, morning, everybody.
Morning,
Hello,
Ryan.
Ryan.
Good morning. Sorry I can't be with you guys today, but I figured whatever I have, I should probably keep to myself, so.
Yeah, thank you for not sharing.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, we'll go through some of these slides pretty quick. You go to the next one. So, if you recall last month, we kind of talked a little bit about some of the kind of the 8-year program and history. And looking at it, for 2022 projected spend, again, still around the 25 million, actually 22 million year to date. You can see kind of where the numbers have been over the last 8 years, and then the 2023 has been updated for the budget that you've seen in the packet, and then we'll get into in some of the other slides. But again, these numbers include the major projects and some of the equipment and departmental projects as well, which we'll get into here in a minute. So we talked about this again last month, made a few minor revisions, but biggest thing, again, including contingencies in each project. Again, you know, projects impacting safety, capacity, and strategic initiatives are ones we look for. The biggest thing is, as you've kind of seen in the packet, is the capital budget's built upon our cash flow and the ideal project schedules, which you'll kind of see when we kind of go through the actual Exhibit A, which shows kind of the phase projects and the different timing there. And then the one thing we did change a little bit from last month is just some of the wording of the categories for the prioritization of the departmental projects. So rather than having emergency and some of the other pieces on there, really, you know, what's operationally critical, what's high, again, what has a regulatory component to it, and then what's kind of a lower, nicer to have project, but still something that we should look at doing. So going into Exhibit A for 2023, you'll see the major projects on there that we talked about a little bit last month. Again, the runway, continuing through those phases, continuing or getting started with some of the bill funding with the parallel taxiway Delta, again, the terminal connector, and then even down for Queen City, the runway rehab, as well as, some of the electrical components. But the biggest thing that some of you may have noticed, and you'll kind of see with how it all ties together, is if you notice line 7 for our terminal connector, you'll see we have a projected project cost for next year of about 11 million funds remaining, yet our share is 0, because kind of as Todd mentioned earlier, with the timing of a lot of the grant receipts, RACP, some of those components, we're actually kind of paying ourselves back next year in 2023, which obviously helps from the cash flow, but in terms of our share. So that's really where that delta comes from. And then moving down the Exhibit A, we got the major non-grant projects. Again, strategic and business critical to ensure continued operations, investing in the infrastructure, in the airport, and in the facilities. And I did mention a little bit, or I showed last month, that graphic of kind of our 8-year projected capital program and some of the projects that relate to some of the components we're doing now to get ourselves ready for those projects. So the biggest things on here really was some of the the commercial non-aeronautical site development, the transportation impact studies for a new signalized intersection over the next few years. Again, continuing to evaluate a parking garage and a GSE storage building, Hangar 7 bathrooms that are ongoing, but most of the construction's happening next year. Again, some of the other larger components, not just equipment, like line 23, the old departure HVAC units, putting some design in there as well. And then, as I think Todd showed it earlier in terms of the previous cash flow, but we're also showing the property acquisitions here, just because it's part of the the capital program from a strategic component. And then on this one, kind of going to the end, we formatted a little bit differently than what we did last year. So line 29, that cumulative department spending, that's all of the departmental projects that's listed on Exhibit B that are in those different priorities categories. But then you actually see kind of what I mentioned before with the grants and some of the timing. So the 2023 total capital spend, you'll kind of see there in the middle, but then the cash flow adjustments are really what our actual share is projected to be based on, based on those reimbursements and timing. I mentioned some of the connector, but the other piece is actually a lot of the runway work that we're completing or have completed over the last month into December. We're not getting reimbursed until we get the closeout completed, which is anticipated to happen, in the spring of next year. So that's some of that delta there as well. And then I mentioned again, the departmental projects. This is just some of the numbers associated with them. As I mentioned, the low categories you'll see on Exhibit B are some of the nicer to have projects that we can look at doing once we've kind of addressed all of the 1, 2s, and 3s, and obviously making sure that all of these are dependent on how things are going in the year, how our cash is going, and part of the other pieces is with supply chain and other components with that. And I believe that's it. So any questions? And I kind of went through it pretty quick, but all that was in the budget packet.
Right. So let's approve the capital improvement program. Mike,
All fault, Mike. Second.
Paul, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. Do we have any new business? Then we call for adjournment. Mike? All in favor? Aye. Adjourn. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Frank. Still good to keep rolling?
Yes.
Okay.
Welcome to the November 22nd Business Committee, the High Northampton Airport Authority. Can we have a roll call, please?
Justin Grimshaw,
Present.
Don Gottschall, James Irwin,
Here.
Jeff Matskin, Glenn Riedman,
Present.
Chris Worley, Tara Zirinsky. You should have quorum.
Thank you. Do you have any public comment?
No, sir.
Assuming everybody got a chance to review the minutes, we have a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor, signify by saying aye.
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 All right. Ryan, I hope you took some water since your last presentation, because you're up again here for the BIL
Thank you.
grant.
Yeah, this one should be pretty straightforward. Again, part of the approval is to accept the Airport Terminals Program grant offer that we're anticipating receiving in the next month or two. Kind of as a reminder, we were notified back in July. We were one of 85 airports in the country that were awarded as part of that program. Again, the award is $5 million. It's actually 95% federally funded versus the typical AIP 90% funded. So you kind of see our share as part of there as well. And again, that's a big piece that was built into the our CIP that was just approved in terms of that available funding. So again, the official grant application that they requested was submitted. And we anticipate receiving the actual grant offer either later this month or early December. So similar as we've done before, wanted to get that in front of the board. So once it comes through, it goes through the same e-signature process, getting everyone to sign. So looking for approval to accept the grant offer for $5 million for the terminal connector and designate the executive director as the authorized representative to review, approve, and fully execute the grant documents.
Assuming this is going to go pretty smooth, I would like to take a motion for exactly what Ryan just said.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, thank you. Next action item, we're going to hold off on for now for the snow removal services. The management team is working on getting that, and once we get a contract, we'll bring that back up. So we'll move on to the discussion items. Darren, air service update, please.
Thank you. All right, so it's been a few months since we talked about the air service. Just want to kind of talk about what's going on in the industry, a little bit about what's going on here and kind of what we're doing. So we're in a bit of a unique position here as we start to come out of the pandemic. Labor shortages, I'm sure we've all heard about the pilot shortage, but there's also, mechanic shortage, ground crew as well. Really putting a lot of stress on growth and obviously increased costs for those. A little silver lining, Tom actually shared with me over the weekend an article he found. Talks about there are actually about 10,000 pilots in the pipeline right now in the U.S., coming up through. So that's a good thing. It's not going to fix this today, but I think as the Airline Pilots Association talked about, it will fix it over the next 10 years or so, where we will be out of this pilot shortage, which is good. Probably a little more concerned about the mechanic shortage, because I feel like we're about, we've been talking about the pilot shortage for a while, and everybody kind of ignored it until it really got bad during COVID. And I kind of feel like this mechanics shortage is where we were with the pilot shortage about 5 years ago, where we're talking about it now, but no one's really doing anything about it. So hopefully we'll get a little action on that and start to work on, filling those voids as well.
Well, just to that point, though, I'm assuming that you work with the Workforce Development Board or, you know what I mean, just, you know, like
So we do,
mechanics are
the
needed.
challenge is really, you know, looking at development of the FAA certified airframe and power plant mechanic schools and getting a lot of folks enrolled into those types of programs.
Your existing, your incumbent workforce or new?
New.
All right.
So getting new people, getting, you know, whether
Get
it's
those-
folks right out of high school or, you know, post-secondary to really look at a career as an aircraft mechanic.
Right, just not mechanic, you need
This
specific
is
certifications.
specific to our airline mechanics, and that's really the shortage in the industry that we see right now, in addition to pilots. So it's,
I'm assuming that training is not offered local then?
it used to be, yeah, I think Quakertown Airport had a school through the Upper Bucks campus, their Upper Bucks Community College campus. But that closed probably over 10 years ago now. And there's some schools down in Philadelphia. There's other schools at Northern Tier of Pennsylvania, and Pittsburgh Institute of Aeronautics has a huge A&P program, airframe power plant mechanic program. But we just don't, you just don't have the enrollment that you used to. So it's really getting folks interested in aviation on that side of the career, or as mechanics. And then there's other industries that pilfer mechanics. So NASCAR is famous for stealing a lot of A&P mechanics.
Can high school students get a jump on this at like LCTI or start
No
a
programs
pathway?
per se. There's no pathways in existence for that. So it continues to be something that the industry hasn't, as a whole, hasn't focused on as much as we talk about the pilot shortage.
Yeah, but the mechanic, especially certifications that it's not offered locally, it's tough to tell a kid travel to Philly.
Right.
But these are, these are good paying jobs. That's the thing I think, you know,
Well,
people.
some assume they are.
You know, so, but it's just like you said, it's getting people.
It's about a 2-year program. It's typically what
And that's right out of high school. So a high school
Typically.
student could go right into that.
could roll right into a 2-year program.
What is the average pay? Not,
We can get that, I'm not sure offhand, but you're just saying overall. I don't have the numbers off the top of my head. I mean, we could certainly share some data on that, because they are good numbers and it's worth understanding.
right.
Yeah.
So then on top of that, we have the fuel cost increases. Everybody knows what's going on with fuel. It certainly is affecting the airline industry for sure. You see some of the carriers up to 100% higher than what they were paying pre-pandemic. So I don't think there's many expenses that are 100% higher at this point in time. We got some that are close, but that hurts obviously. And at the bottom there, lots of revenue coming in. They're just not making any money on that revenue because of these challenges that I talked about above. You know, and that revenue, industry-wise, being driven by leisure traffic, and certainly we're following that same thing here. Business travel is coming back. It's not here yet. It continues to recover. It's still, depending on what, you know, metric you look at, about 30% below where it was in 2019. So we're not quite there yet. Interesting here, the transatlantic recovery doing much better than the trans-Pacific, and that's important to us, and I'll just kind of keep that in the back of your mind, and we'll talk about it in a couple slides. So this one just talks about the airline industry as a whole as compared to US GDP and where it is available seat miles per $1,000 of GDP. So it kind of talks, you can see there, you know, we're in 2022 estimated about 43 seat miles per 1,000. So we're back to about the 2015 level. You know, so we haven't recovered to where we were pre-pandemic in 2019 where you saw it there. So just showing, you know, the industry is still recovering. You know, nice trajectory there from 2020 on up, but we still got a little ways to go before the industry is kind of built back to where it was. So we talked about costs and just breaking down some of those costs. This is in cents. So you can see there, huge rise in fuel. It used to be about 3 cents per available seat mile. Now it's up to almost 5 cents per available seat mile, big jump. You know, I think we've talked about this in the past. When fuel gets to be expensive, that becomes the #1 expense for the airlines. And you can see it's almost there now. Labor's still outpacing it by a little bit, but you know, as that labor market starts to flatten a little bit, we'll see what happens to fuel, and we may go back to where fuel is the #1 expense. You can see the airport landing fees and rents going up, similar to what ours are going up. So we're, you know, kind of along with the industry. And then I think the big increase there is that interest one, you know, basically almost triple what it was. And the big thing of that is the airlines all took on a ton of debt during COVID. So that interest rate going up is definitely going to hamper their ability to continue to grow. This one really talks about what's going on regionally. In the next couple slides, we're going to talk about what's going on with aircraft and regional airports. So you can see over the last 15 years, the average flight distance has gone down or gone up about 100 miles. And flights, you can see back in 2007, we had about 10 million flights. In 2022, we're looking at about 7.5 million flights. Reason behind that is, back in 2007, we had a lot of small airplanes flying around. We had 19-seat aircraft going out of here, 28-seat aircraft going out of here. You know, that's why those made sense to go to Philly and Newark and Pittsburgh and back then even Cincinnati, Cleveland, those types of markets. Now the smallest thing you're going to see going out of almost every airport is a 50-seat aircraft. No longer efficient to run a 50-seat aircraft to Philly, certainly not to Newark. You know, that's why we're seeing these changes happening. And as you'll see on the next couple slides, those 50-seaters are starting to go the way of the 19-seaters and the 28-seaters. So this is not an ABE thing, this is an industry change, you know, you're kind of seeing the shift. So, and you can see it here. So this is in jet block hours, so how many hours they're flying and the decrease. Those 50 seats are that bottom blue line there, and you can see that is pretty much not far above where it was back in the height of the pandemic. And you can see the trend of that, and that is going to go to zero. That line is going to eventually bottom out to zero. Even the large regional jets you can see are fading off some. Those large ones are up to 85 seats. There is another category of regional jets, sort of it's regional jets / mainline jets, you know, those 90 seat and above. So they're still doing okay, but we're classifying RJs as all 85 and below. And like I said, you can see that's dying off. And what that does, it hurts airports like us. It hurts regional airports. This isn't hurting the hubs. You know, it's hurting the connecting flights. That's why you're seeing some of the things that we've seen over the last year or so as far as our flights. This just shows it in a little bit different way here. You can see that those small RJs are down 62% from 2019. I mean, huge numbers. Parking RJs at a rate of 25 aircraft per month. You know, that's, again, it is going to affect the way the airlines do business, especially at regional airports. And I thought when you see that 640 aircraft have been removed from service since August of 2019. It's a lot of airplanes parked. And just this one, these are two of the largest regional carriers out there. And you can see what the market thinks of the regional airline industry. As you can see, their stocks have both just pretty much bottomed out from where they were. So I guess if anybody's holding regional airline stock, sorry, because I think you should have probably sold it a year ago at this point in time. But really, just like I said, I just want to put this in there because it basically shows we're seeing that those regional airline, that business is definitely changing and contracting. So where is the growth coming from? We just saw it, Todd showed you, Allegiant is growing. All those ultra low-cost carriers, Spirit, Frontier, Allegiant, JetBlue, they're all growing. While the legacy carriers, and I kind of lump Southwest into that legacy carrier category because they pretty much act like a legacy carrier these days and not the low-cost carrier they once were. They have not recovered back to those pre-pandemic numbers yet, so they're still down as far as available seat miles go. And then how's that affecting us here? So you can see Allegiant out there, industry-wide, growing about 17%. Here, they're growing over 44%. So big jump there. You see our legacy carriers are all down a little bit more than what their industry average is. You know, American, that Philadelphia service being suspended. These numbers do not include the buses, so they wouldn't put those seats back into this. So taking Philly out of there for American definitely has affected that. We had our Detroit service suspended back in October. That's basically definitely hurting us now. And remember back on that first slide, I talked about the Trans-Pacific traffic not recovering as quickly. That's one of the reasons that we lost Detroit service. Detroit is a major Asia hub for Delta. So a lot of the traffic we're feeding to Detroit is flow going to Asia. So until that market comes back and the business market comes back, it's going to be hard to rebuild Detroit. And then you also see, you know, United, a lot of that is decline on the Chicago frequencies. So, still talking to the airlines. Just in Vegas last month at a conference, met with 8 different airlines. We definitely got some good news out of it. Charlotte and Atlanta continue to do well. Those are kind of our stalwarts as far as the legacy routes. They always do well. Allegiant, pretty much everything is doing well, as you can see from the growth that we just showed. Interesting though, AB Sanford is the #1 revenue route in the Allegiant system. And it's the #3 as far as seats go in the system. So no matter how much capacity we keep throwing on that, we keep filling those airplanes and they keep making money on that. That's important, obviously, for Allegiant's growth. Also important to us as we talk to other low-cost carriers. Delta's telling us we could see Detroit as early as summer 23. Could be later, you know, we're still working with them, but we could come back that quickly. We do expect it will come back. So we also had when we were out there, we talked to a lot of the low-cost carriers. We met with Avella, we met with Breeze, we met with Spirit, we met with JetBlue. They all recognize that there's opportunity here at AB, so that's good. And as they're able to get back to growing, we're gonna continue to make sure we're working with them on that growth. And then last thing on there on the good news is, as much as we wish those were airplanes, the bus service is doing very well. The passengers like it, they're taking it, it's good, it's getting people into the airport, it's making us some money. Now, on the challenges, we are gonna see our Chicago service suspended in January from American, and United's only gonna be 1 daily flight. Biggest reason there, again, it's a business market. There's not too many people going to Chicago in January for leisure, unless you're masochistic or something, I don't know, but, so that's really what's going on. I mean, Chicago, we need to see the business travel continue to recover to see those come back. Our Allegiant service to Savannah, we haven't been told officially, but we do expect that it may be suspended as well, and that really comes back to those resource issues. Allegiant has some unique issues because we talked about the pilot shortage. So starting in 2023, Allegiant's going to start taking delivery of some 737s. They don't currently operate that model aircraft. They operate all Airbuses. So now they've got to actually pull Airbus pilots off the line to train them to fly the 737. So it's just going to, it's sort of the classic short-term pain for long-term gain thing. You know, it's going to make that pilot shortage worse for them in the initial phases. Eventually, those 737s, I think, will be beneficial to us, but it's just going to take time until they're able to transition over. We do not expect to see Dulles service coming back from United. Remember, that was added in, I guess it was December 2020. That was basically, at that point, it was added to take advantage of all the people that were trying to get out of the Northeast and go to Florida. There was a ton of north-south flow. You know, that's not happening at the same rate anymore. You know, and honestly, this is more of a Dulles issue than an AV issue. United at Dulles is still kind of trying to figure out exactly what their strategy is going to be there. Next thing is our high costs. You know, Todd just showed you the costs. Our costs are higher than we would like to see them be. Definitely higher than the airlines would like to see them be. So that's something we have to continue to work on as well. And then the Allegiant crew base here is the other thing as far as the ULCC growth. So high costs, coupled with the fact that we have a ULCC based here, makes it more challenging when we're talking to other ULCCs about coming in here and adding a new airline to here. You know, they, especially some of the newer ones, the Breezes, the Avellos, they're not really interested in coming in and taking on the 800-pound gorilla right now when they're still trying to figure out, you know, and grow and become a bigger airline. So I think it's a short-term thing for us. The cost piece we have to work on, but I think, you know, the crew base eventually they'll be ready to compete, but not today. And that's on two fronts. One, it's can they take market share from them here? The other piece is if they come in here, what does Allegiant do to retaliate somewhere else? You know, so.
Right, is that true amongst all regional airports? Like there's one ULCC typical or?
No, you do see
Not
some with
necessarily.
more.
Not necessarily, but
Based at the airport?
based, yeah, that
Yeah.
probably is a lot more typical.
Yeah, you wouldn't see too many that are gonna have two based there, but you wouldn't see some that have service like,
Right.
from multiple ULCCs.
Okay.
So it's like, you know, listen, that Allegiant crew base is the best thing that happened to us when it happened, or we wouldn't see that huge growth. But like every, you know, there's always the bad side of everything too, you know, so that does sort of hurt us a little bit as we're talking to other carriers. And then the one thing we have heard from every airline that we talked to over the last couple of months is growth is gonna be limited in 2023 from everybody. You're seeing some growth, you're seeing some announcements here and there, but it is definitely going to be limited because they don't have the pilots, the expenses are higher, you know, the fuel costs, the labor costs, all of that is gonna hamper that growth.
Right, hang on, we talking about passenger side or cargo side?
This is all passenger. We're not talking really cargo here. Cargo is a whole different animal. They work on a whole different, you know, the way they grow is more predicated obviously on their own business and everything else, you know, and it's just, it has, yeah. So where do we go from here? What can we do now? You know, I think it's really three things. Our first thing is we need to maintain what we have. We need to continue to protect the service that we have here. We can't control fuel costs, we can't control the pilot shortage, labor costs, those types of things, but we can control our costs as much as possible. So we have to continue to work on that, you know, focus on cost reduction and even probably more so on revenue growth. You know, the operational capabilities, you know, we've talked internally several times about, it'd be great to have another airline here right now, but with our checkpoint downstairs, if we had 2 or 3 more flights in the morning, that would be awful. That would probably be the worst thing we could do, because now we're gonna have checkpoint wait times that are 3 hours, you know, and that's not gonna work for us. So
6 months.
getting the new checkpoint in early next year sometime definitely starts to position us to grow. The jet bridges that you saw in Ryan's capital program, getting the work done on those, adding the additional jet bridge, all of that stuff starts to set us up so that as the industry recovers, we're ready to start taking advantage of that and we're ready to start growing.
All right, so on the revenue growth side, you know, I've heard Todd talk about parking, increased parking fees. What else is there out there?
I mean, it's all the non-aeronautical stuff we're looking at too, the hotel, the stuff we're working with Majestic on, you know, any other non-aeronautical development we can do. We're looking at redoing our concessions program, and that's gonna give some incremental revenue, the advertising program, all of those things, it just all rolls up.
But the Majestic and a hotel, that's not next year, that's gonna be down the
Right,
line.
longer
Yeah, they'll be
term.
longer.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Short-term growth, though, probably is the parking fees, right, Todd?
Yeah, that's right.
Right, that's short-term right
That
now.
is short term right away.
All right.
Even we talked about the Uber and Lyft stuff. I mean, again, some of these things are just kind of low hanging fruit.
Yeah.
It's just, you gotta be careful because you don't want to charge too much. People say that's too much.
Well, assuming same thing with concessions.
Right,
That's
same thing.
kind of low hanging, but,
Right.
Well, it probably won't, concessions hopefully won't be so much as increasing price, it's just better offerings and hopefully getting people to spend more when they're here because the offerings are a little better than we have today. That's really what we're looking at there.
all right.
You know, and there are other things we just did, you know, 2 months ago, we approved that Cisco lease. You know, that's $250,000, certainly not to move the needle necessarily on a, you know, $35 million budget or whatever it is today.
40.
But, okay, $40 million budget, but all of those things, you know, like I said, it's always looking for opportunities.
We'll take 250 to the positive, right, Todd? I mean,
That's right. We'll take 250 at a pop. Yeah, no problem. Keep going.
We need a lot of those 250s, you know, so that's what it is. There's no magic bullet, there's no one thing that's gonna fix this, so.
okay.
And that's one of the things we've talked about for a while strategically, is just, you know, again, looking at what's happening on the airline revenue side, and, you know, the aeronautical revenue side. Airports across the country are looking at the non-aero piece, and what is it on those other non-aeronautical revenues that we can find to generate. That's really the key.
And then, you know, so from there, then it is getting back to rebuilding, you know, again, like I said, we continue, we were just at the conference last month, we're already scheduled for 2, we have another Roots conference in the spring, we have the Legion conference in the spring, we have regular phone conversations with the airlines, just maintaining that regular communication. Airlines are starting to do a little bit more headquarter visits things, so we're trying to get kind of on that schedule to start stopping in at the headquarters and talking to these folks. So as they start to recover, we can start to get back some of the things that we've lost. You know, Detroit is certainly top on our list of what we've lost, to get that back, get it reestablished. And then getting the capacity up. You know, like I said, Atlanta and Charlotte both are doing very well, but they could afford, you know, we could definitely have some more capacity on those routes. We could get more frequencies, we could get larger aircraft. And Chicago, you know, again, building that capacity up both on American and United to Chicago. And then last but not least, we are going to grow again. It's just, like I said, it's stunted a little bit right now. But our growth is probably going to be mostly with those low-cost and ultra-low-cost carriers. It's not to say there aren't, you know, there won't be some one-off opportunities to grow with the legacy carriers. I feel like DFW is back in play at some point in time once the business travel comes back and Chicago is built back up, you know. There could be others, you know, maybe Denver with United at some point. But, you know, those are all, like I said, sort of one-offs. Our real growth opportunities are to find that next low-cost carrier that's going to come here, and also to get Allegiant to get back to continuing to grow and adding new destinations. So we talked about our costs. I'm always talking about how high our costs are, but the one thing we've really started to work on with these low-cost carriers is showing them we have better revenue here as well. You know, so there's 2 sides to every equation. So our costs are higher, but you can actually make more money here on the revenue side too. So that's sort of our strategy right now with the low-cost carriers, is demonstrating that and showing them that long-term success that Allegiant has had here. They've been here for 20 plus years, steady growth since they've been here. They do well here. So that not only helps us convince them to continue to grow, but also shows that this market can support low cost. There is a lot of leisure traffic. So, and then on the bottom there, working with all of our airlines to promote those focus destinations. You'll remember these were from our incentive program a couple months ago. These are just in alphabetical order, certainly not order of importance, but working on those: Boston, Denver, Dallas, Las Vegas, Orlando, and San Juan, trying to see how we can either establish service to those, find the right partner to establish service there. And since we mentioned San Juan, last but not least, what are we doing there? We all know that is certainly very important to this community. We all feel like this could be really, it could be a very successful route for us. So when we were at the Roots Conference, we talked to several carriers about this. We got some, kind of warm interest, which I was actually pretty happy with in looking at this. But I just told you all the challenges the industry's having. So taking on a new route that in their mind is probably a little risky, we have to convince them to do that. The way we're going to convince them to do that is to help minimize that risk. And that's by finding minimum revenue guarantee. We can't do that. The airport authority is not permitted to provide that money for a revenue guarantee. That is basically subsidizing air service, which, like I said, we can't do. The other airlines would be just a little bit upset with us. But there are some opportunities out there. We're looking into the Small Community Air Service Development Program. That's a federal program. We will need at least one airline to sign off and give us a letter of support on that. So we've reached out to some partners. I do think we have one that's willing to support that application, so that's good. This is a little bit outside of the normal scope for those grants. A lot of those are more connection through the hubs to increase connectivity, but it's not out of the realm of possibility. So we are going to pursue that. I haven't told Colin this yet, but we're going to look at state funding. So hopefully there's some state funding out there. So I'm usually in Colin's office about 3 days a week saying I need money for something. So this will be a new one for us. And then last, the way these things are typically built is you really find that local coalition. We know there's a lot of interest from the community here. We need to figure out a way to bring that community together, build that coalition, whether it's, public or private entities. They can come together and we put together the number that we need to go to the airlines and say, okay, we have X number of dollars to guarantee the success of this route. Hopefully we never touch this. The whole goal of the minimum revenue guarantee is that the route does exactly what we all think it will do, and that money all goes back to whoever put it up at the end of the day. But we need to have it there so that if it doesn't do what it does, it minimizes that risk.
What's an estimate of X? How much money?
We're working on it. I don't want to throw a number out because I don't honestly know. So we have our consultants, our air service consultants crunching some numbers. We'll have a number soon on that. It's going to be a large number. I mean, it's a 7-figure number for sure. So it's going to be a large number if we're going to have this service. So that's all I got. Happy to answer any questions anybody has.
Seeing none, thank you, Darren.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
Just real quick question on the, I might have missed part of the discussion around the small community grant. What is the disincentive? Why would an airline not want to participate?
Well, I think that the big thing is when they're giving us a letter of support is basically saying, hey, if you get the money, we'll probably take on this route. So it's not that they wouldn't, any of them would love to have the money for sure. It's can they actually support the route at the end of the day, So what we've heard from the one is, we're very interested in this. We're just not sure exactly how soon we'll be able to start flying that route. It may not be a 2024 thing or 2023 thing. So that's really what it comes down to, Matt. It's not a matter of whether or not they're interested in, like I said, certainly taking the grant money or any of them, but it's can they support the route if we're able to obtain the grant.
Got it. Thanks.
Any other questions for Darren? All right. Ryan, capital projects update, please.
See if he has one more item.
All right, thank you. All right, so we'll go through typical monthly update. Not much has changed here, but we'll go through these just as well. Kind of where we are with the runway at this point. Kind of just doing some punch list items. Really getting, obviously part of the winter shutdown, but kind of see like the light blue of the substantially complete areas and where they've been working. So this grant, package 1, project closeout's been submitted. We're just waiting on the FAA to finalize their review to draw down the rest of the, I think around 400,000 that's left. So nothing new there, but just waiting on the FA for that. Package 2, working on submitting the project closeout package probably earlier in December. All of the work's been completed. It's kind of going through the final pay applications and quantity adjustments there, which will then allow us to do the final 10% draw on the grant to get all our funding reimbursed. So package 3, they've completed the concrete swale installation, which is part of the stormwater component on the north side of the field. And again, just working through some of the final punch list items to try and finish up for this year. And again, work on that closeout next, likely in January of next year. And then package 4, the picture on the left there is taxiway Echo. It has been paved. So the taxiway edge lighting has also been put in place, and the temporary markings and signage is ongoing. And then I think, as we mentioned before, the taxiway Gulf and Alpha 3 relocation will be completed next year in the spring. But that project's been moving along here pretty well before the winter shutdown as well. And then again, package 5, nothing new there. Really going to start up in the spring for that shoulder work, but still tracking that accordingly. And moving on to Queen City, really what's left with the design, as we mentioned before, is the electrical vault and lighting component. So working through that, hopefully to line up with the grant timeline in the spring of next year. And then starting in the spring of next year with the grant that we got for the construction of the pavement rehabilitation, looking to get that started once the weather breaks. So really just going through all the paperwork and submittal process now. So once, either March or April, once the weather breaks, work with the contractor and scheduling that work to be completed. Then moving on to Braden, I think we mentioned before that certificate of occupancy was received. We are utilizing the space. Did get all of our grant funding reimbursed. Since last meeting, the flagpole has been installed, and you kind of see there on the left, and then we're waiting on the front and rear entrance awnings, which should be added here mid-December timeframe. So those are really the last final components getting that project wrapped up. Then you kind of see where we are from the expenditure side. Nothing major to report there. You can kind of see where we are with the contract amounts and percentages. Again, with some of the runway rehab projects coming to completion here. I think that's all I had for that one. Any questions on those projects? All right, moving on to the connector. A lot of good progress here in the last month. You can kind of see some of the items that are ongoing there on the left in terms of what they've been doing with the lighting and the ceiling grid, which I think the pictures will speak better than I could, but also the elevator and escalator work. Escalators are on site, so it's good to see that as well. So again, kind of see some of the site, and as I mentioned, they're working on the escalators and elevators now, and beginning of next month should be starting some of the terrazzo installation in the connector space itself. Again, another view from the outside. Another view from the outside. So they're working, again, working as we've done before with the metal panels and, you know, with the plastic tarp, kind of working through that as well. And you can see the vertical circulation core, getting that closed off so they can start doing the interior fit out there as well. Kind of see under the bridge, and then in the bridge itself, starting to put the ceiling grid in place. And this is actually at the end of the bridge into Wiley. And this is actually on the first level of the old departure level, where the new elevators and escalators are, right outside of the new vertical circulation core. And then again, this is actually looking down or into the vertical circulation core down on the left, and on the right is kind of the again the concession storage and some of the elevator openings there. Again, another view of the vertical circulation core coming together. And this is down in the tunnel. Again, seeing do more work they've done from before, but getting everything set up for those escalators to go in. Again, another view of the connector itself. You can kind of see in the middle in the background those big white pieces of the escalators kind of sitting there getting ready. And you can see a lot of the ceiling grid and the lighting coming into place, which is really starting to bring the space together. You see a couple more shots of that, the ceiling grid, again, more of the lighting, more of the painting. A shot of the ceiling grid. Another view there as well, seeing how that's going. And yep, another view there. Again, it's a view above where the TSA offices are. Again, getting that space all ready as well. Again, just another view. And this is actually looking back into where the opening will be going into the terminal. That's actually in the what will be the future queue space, kind of behind the wall that's right outside the boardroom. And then kind of just looking what we're doing, as we mentioned, with the vertical core, finalizing that kind of as that first phase. And then you can see where we are percentage-wise, about just under 66%. You kind of see the different categories there. Working through those as well. Again, kind of with working on the elevators and escalators, getting the core, the vertical circulation core up and running, and obviously commissioning the new checkpoint, getting that complete before moving on to phase 3, which is the tunnel. Phase 3. So again, with where we are with the grant funding, we've talked a lot about, but you kind of see that there. Still waiting on the potential $600,000 for that community project funds. We're going to see also where we are financially, expenditures to date, and working through, still working through the schedule. The biggest component now that we're trying to narrow down is the dynamic glass that is coming for most of the connector and the vertical circulation core is really just narrowing down the timing of delivery. I've gotten confirmation on about, I think, 90% of the windows. We're waiting on that final 10% amount. So working through that with the with the contractors, you know, just to make sure that we continue to meet the schedule. We are continuing to have conversations with TSA regarding their equipment delivery and what they'll be providing. So definitely doing some more coordination there as well. I believe that's all I had. If anyone has any questions?
Any questions for Ryan? Ryan, thank you. I know that was a struggle to get through. You sound wonderful today, pal.
Yeah, thank
Good
you.
luck. Hopefully you get better by Turkey Day there.
Appreciate it.
All right, seeing none, any new business? Seeing none, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor, say aye. Adjourn.
Yes, still good to roll? You want to take a break? How we doing?
This is not gonna be a long meeting unless we just get it.
Yeah, we can keep moving.
We'll hold the order of the executive committee. Yvette, would you please call the roll?
John Hayes, Glenn Reedman,
Present.
Justin Grimshaw,
Present.
Mike Stershik, Tara Zirinsky, Matt Turk. We have a quorum.
Thank you, Sylvette. Is there any public comment?
No, sir.
Seeing none, we'll move to the action items. Approval of the minutes of the October 24th meeting. Take a motion for approval.
I'll make a motion.
Second,
Second.
any additions or corrections? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
We'll go to item B, the approval of the Florio Perucci, Steinhardt, Capelli, Tipton, and Taylor LLC invoices.
Just wait a bar puns at the end there.
Rolls off the tongue.
Is Luke Capelli still a commissioner in Camden County?
I believe he is. I'm not sure exactly, but I know he's still active in local New Jersey
He's
politics.
a very nice guy.
He is.
We have a motion for approval.
I'll make a motion.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
All right. Approval of the First Amendment to the Forks Township Agreement. That's Darren.
That is me. Thank you, sir. So we've talked about this agreement with Forks Township over the last couple of years. This agreement was entered into between LNAA and Forks Township back in the year 2000. Basically accomplished two things. One, it gave us a lease for the turf runoff area at the end of the runway so we could achieve the runway length needed. And then the second piece of it, it basically placed some operational restrictions on the airfield. So we've gone to the township. We were, I was at a couple of, 3 township supervisor meetings to discuss this with them about adjusting this agreement. It's really just a minor adjustment. And what's kind of driving this adjustment is we've been working with a company who operates a skydive. It's a skydive company. They are considering moving their operation to here. They were up in East Stroudsburg. That airport is actually closed. They operated all over the place this summer, and they're looking to kind of bring it back in the area. So scroll down just a little bit. So that, I'm sorry, no, go back up. I missed. There we go, stop right there. So currently Section 8 lists, the Section 8 agreement lists 17 different events that would constitute a default of this agreement by the authority. Paragraph M lists the following. If we allow any aircraft over 7,500 pounds, wingspan of 49 feet, or a landing speed of 91 knots. That's where we're asking for the amendment because these aircraft are a little bit larger wingspan and a little bit larger tail height. So what we're asking is, instead of listing those numbers out, we're basically going back to an FAA advisory circular that talks about aircraft approach category and airplane design group. And what we've asked for is to amend this agreement to we cannot permit aircraft that exceed the characteristics in aircraft approach category A or airplane design group 2 as defined in that advisory circular. So aircraft approach category A restricts aircraft speeds to less than 91 knots. So basically the same thing that we already have in there. So these aren't faster aircraft. But it also permits aircraft with tail heights less than or equal to 30 feet and less than or equal to 79 feet. That wingspan is really what we're looking for here. So that these aircraft for the skydive operation could be able to operate there. The township supervisors did vote to approve this, so they're in favor. We our solicitor has taken a look at the agreement and everything. I know she will be working with the Fork solicitor just to get the language and get the actual amendment to the agreement done. So our recommendation is to approve that as presented, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
I'm assuming if they move in the area, this is another form of revenue for us.
Yeah, absolutely. This would be a lot of activity at Braden. Honestly, I think it would sort of wake the airport up a bit through the summer at least. They're a pretty big outfit, and they've been around 20-plus years doing this, so they've got a pretty good following. Definitely very good for that airport, for sure.
Any other questions? Seeing none, we'll take a motion to approve the first amendment to the Forks Township Agreement.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second it.
Second? Been moved and second?
I think it's not gonna be a First Amendment, I'm sorry.
It is, there was an addendum, it's not an amendment.
Oh, okay.
I actually looked.
No, that makes sense.
Thanks.
You okay, Madam?
Yes, thank you.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you, Darren. Move to Colin. Public and Government Relations.
Flying right in there.
We'll move things along.
I'll move it quick. I understand. Well, thank you, everybody, for another great opportunity to talk to the board about legislative and community engagement. We've had a lot that's gone on over the last several months and really throughout the year. So we want to bring everyone up to date on current legislative items that are in the pipeline, things that we've been successful in doing, and then some of the community engagement as well. So as we can see with all the great holiday commercials now, the political commercials are gone and the dust has settled. So November elections came and went. There were some obviously changes within the Lehigh Valley. As a result of the November elections, we've reached out to our new legislators that will be taking office to arrange meetings to come to the airport, understand what's going on here. We typically do meetings with our legislators throughout the year, current ones, so to have the opportunity to bring newly elected legislators to the airport and see all the growth and the activity that's going on here is going to be very important as we move forward. So this is kind of broken up into two sections. So the overall funding for the TSA Checkpoint Terminal Connector project. We just wanted to circle back on this because this has really been the focus. This has been the focus for over 2 years now. And if you just look at the fuel gauge, we talk about 93% of eligible project costs funded by grants, which includes the LNAA match. We started on this road a while ago, and I remember Todd and I sitting in the office, how are we going to get there, how are we going to get there, because you had the money that the airport was going to assume, but we needed the support. We needed the federal support, we needed the state support, we needed people to believe in the project. And we were able to secure $18 million, which is great. And it's broken down off of the airport terminal program, the RACP, the Bureau of Aviation, PennDOT Multimodal, and the ACE grant regarding alternative clean energy. And that's a great menu of items that we were able to couple together. When we started, we thought, okay, maybe we can get a big RACP grant. Well, those are gone now. Those don't happen anymore. We had to kind of chop down the tree little by little. And we were able to do that with a belief, again, of federal, state, and local officials. The airport terminal program, just for example, we didn't know if an infrastructure bill was going to come through. And it did. And it came through at the right time for the airport. And through the support of all of our federal legislators, Senator Casey, Congresswoman Wild, Senator Toomey, we were able to, again, secure that funding, which is so important. So, mission accomplished in a lot of ways. That being said, there's one thing that Ryan mentioned that's still hanging out there, and that's the community project funding, and that was a $600,000 funding request we put in through Congresswoman Wild's office and Senator Casey. And it's a program in which goes to the appropriations bill. So right now that appropriations bill is nowhere near, I think, at this point where it's going to be voted upon. Last year, the appropriations bill at the federal level went through in about February. So there's a little bit of timing here, and I guess with the elections going through, we can expect a little bit of a stall in some way in that funding request going through. But it's part of many projects throughout the Lehigh Valley. I know Congresswoman Wild had her projects approved and supported. We're using it for the installation of public circulation control devices. So that's at the end of the tunnel. when you're coming in as an arriving passengers, the portal doors that will allow you to exit and not have TSA down there at the bottom. You see that in many airports. When you're going into baggage claim, you pass through, it shuts behind you, and then that's security for our purposes. There's also going to be some security devices and public circulation devices at the end of the bridge so that you can't walk back into the TSA checkpoint. So having funding for that, again, alleviates some costs to the authority and to the project. So, hopefully over the next several months, we'll be able to see that community project funding come through. Ryan painted this picture and shared it with you from the capital investment and major investments through 2030. You can see all of them. And I know Todd's going to tell you we can't fund them all. So we're going to have to find ways to, again, through the federal, state, and local level, achieve funding through different programs. Now, some of them will be eligible for funding, some will not be. But we've been able to paint a picture and a vision for our federal, state, and local leaders. They see what we're trying to build here at the airport. Yeah, we talked about air service, and we got a passenger boarding bridge, funding for a passenger boarding bridge that will help with the growth of air service and the connector as well. But we talked about the non-aeronautical revenue, and we talked about this commercial non-aeronautical development. And talking to legislators, there's excitement around that because we can bring things to the valley that are beneficial to the general public. Moving the entranceway down, but we've talked about restaurants, hotels, different projects from an infrastructure standpoint that will be eligible for funding. And here we go, right out of the gate. For RACP, which was approved, and we accepted a grant award for $1 million. And this is from the thought process and project scope of creation of pad-ready sites for commercial development and parking booth demolition. That whole area over by the old terminal, where we talked about a possible hotel, a possible restaurant. This will help go towards that project. It's a $1 million award to the authority. Obviously, we got a lot of support for the connector project, so to continue to get that support is great, and the belief in the vision. So that's $1 million, so we'll also have to put up $1 million. So that'll be $2 million towards a project here on the airfield. Great support for this from the Chamber of Commerce, Frank, Discover Lehigh Valley, both county executives, our legislators. Again, everybody hopping on board to help secure that funding. In correlation with that and running in concert, you've got the DCED multimodal, and it's similar. So we're trying to package together some funding in order to achieve some of the infrastructure that we need over there. So we talked about demolition of the existing parking booth, rehabilitation of some pavement, creating that whole area. Because if you put some development over there, the parking booth can't be there. It's got to go. That whole roadway was not really created for a lot of heavy traffic. So if you're bringing in people to go to a hotel or a restaurant, we need to be able to put some infrastructure in place, high mass lighting, build it up. You see with the multimodal transportation center. These guys were here before me. I kind of came in as that was being built. But when you drive in now at night or you drive in, it's bright. People see it from the roadway, and it really changes the face of the airport. As with some of these projects, it will change the face, the front end of the airport. So we put in for a $3 million funding request. That application was submitted in July 15th. We met with our legislators, and we're waiting. Hopefully by the end of the year, that potential funding could come through and help support that project. Also submitted, again, in relation to that same type project, is the PennDOT multimodal. It's November 14th. We put it through for $3 million, creating commercial development. It's a lot of money that we're going to have to put in for infrastructure, and it's not going to come from one spot. So the more lines we can put in the water as we continue to do that, and legislators will tell you, if you can't hit a home run in one couple singles, we'll get you there. So it'll be great to see if we can also speak to PennDOT as we move forward here through another funding application from the PennDOT multimodal. The airport land development zones. The last time I gave a update on government relations, we talked about this. This was approved and passed. This is great for airports around the entire Commonwealth. $2,100 tax credit per net new job created over a maximum of 10 years, commercial airports, 300 acres max. So Darren's talked about Majestic and that project. This would apply to some acreage for that. We've talked about air cargo development, potential to be able to use this airport land development zone program in order to attract and create jobs and bring, employers to the region. So this is exciting. The application process will begin in the coming months. They've sort of loosely put out some guidelines, and we're working through the application process. It's going to be interesting over the next few months because you're talking about a change of administration, obviously at the governor's office. So, and really, a whole new change when you talk about the House and the PA Senate and new leaders coming in. So we're going to continue to work on this and keep everybody updated. But another opportunity in the state funding. We're going to shift to the bipartisan infrastructure law bill. We outlined this. I just wanted to remind everybody about it. We will receive $3.5 million in additional entitlement funds. That was through an allocated formula. But then the airport terminal program, which we were able to secure the $5 million for the connector. Moving forward, we're right back in bill again to try $8.5 million. Darren talked about the concession area. We talked about a terminal modernization project that really fits the bill. When we looked at the projects that won funding and received funding in the last round, this was something that we saw. And it would be great to really modernize. When you talk about this new pathway through into the terminal, here's an opportunity to make the concession area better, reconfigure that concession area. Terminal seating, we need new terminal seating. We heard about charging stations and the way people are traveling today, and we need to be able to do that. So going after the $8.5 million in the bill funding. Shifting a little bit out of the funding aspect, and I'd be happy to answer questions at the end. Community engagement is another area in which we continue to push and grow. This was something that we actually got from the conference we went through from AAAE. It's the Creative Ed Songwriting Program. We did this for Veterans Day. It's going to run to the end of the year. It's actually a program where these songs were written by veterans, and the passengers can actually use a QR code to download these songs that were performed by country artists in Nashville and musicians, and we've had a real nice response. We put in the Military Resource Center in the airport several years ago, and we put in a book of, a sign-in book, and it's filled. It's filled. I mean, every page in it. And you just realize how important it is when it comes to our veterans. And to have a program like this is something that just elevates that. So certainly great to have it up now and during Veterans Day. It's been well received and throughout the rest of the year. We've got a lot of things coming up over the next few weeks. We've got Passenger Appreciation Day tomorrow, a heavy travel day. We'll have our advertisers in the building. We'll be giving away snacks and music, and there'll just be a lot of fun to travel through here, which always hits home with our passengers. Our Festival of Trees has been around over 25 years, and local schools come in and decorate these trees, local community groups, and they're positioned all throughout the facility. We have our Shop with an Airport Cop coming up in just a couple weeks. And Shop with an Airport Cop is really an emotional day for a lot of people that participate. We're actually increasing the number of kids. We're up over now 23 kids that will be participating in the program on that Saturday. Target's a great sponsor. We have a local group that provides the funding for it. And really, it's their favorite assignment of the year. They really do enjoy it. It's a great interaction to really spread holiday cheer for a lot of people that need it over this time of the year. Our North Pole flight is returning. Over the last couple of years, we were unable to utilize United to fly. And the North Pole flight is the Pediatric Cancer Foundation of the Greater Lehigh Valley coming in. And kids fighting cancer right now, going through cancer. And this is a day where they'll come and we'll board a flight, a United flight, and fly and go to the North Pole. And they'll return here, and it really brings a lot of smile to everybody's faces and really takes you to the season and what it's all about. And our holiday concert series is also returning in a big way this year. We have 12 holiday concerts, local schools coming in. It's that community engagement. It's letting people know the airport is here and really, creating an environment for them to come and perform for all of our passengers, and the passengers certainly absolutely love it. John wanted me to discuss this regarding the LNAA Board of Governors meetings and the YouTube engagement. And if you can take a look at the year-to-date versus calendar year 2021 and the YouTube engagement, it's strong. It really does create that transparency, that way of obtaining information, whether you're a board member, a staff member, a community member, a legislator. It really does open the doors here up to the authority. So it's great that we had this in place back in 2016. We started, but we've also expanded it because we do committee meetings now. That came out of the pandemic, and we continue to see people watch and see and want to know what's going on with the authority and the airports. So really, something that's we're going to keep in place and continue hopefully to see it grow and the engagement continue to rise.
Colin, is there any way of knowing how many of those are concurrent with the meeting and how many of those are after the fact?
I can see the concurrency on the YouTube as we're going through it. I would say the majority of them are.
Well, it would have to be.
Are after. And that's just basically based off of the fact that we're noon on a Tuesday or 9:30 a.m. It's tough, for committee meetings even. Tough, right? So, the majority of them. So, I also went through the timeline. It varies. Some, it could be 15 minutes. Some it could be, 25 minutes. Sometimes it really depends on what we're talking about. That people kind of, can see and see if they're going to stay engaged. So it's great to have that YouTube channel in place. Absolutely. And then, of course, I always remind people the on-approaches emails. I know sometimes they can, come at the worst time or put a lot of more emails into your inbox. But, it's something that we try to create. If there's an issue, if there's something going on, I like to make sure that everybody understands what's going on here at the airport before the media gets it, the public gets it, or just general information that we have going out. Does anybody have any questions?
Any questions for Colin? Very good report, Colin.
Thank you. Thank you,
Good
Colin.
activities. Any new business? Madam Solicitor, do we need a executive session?
Can I just comment on something that when Colin spoke about this, and it kind of ties into the aircraft mechanics. Do we reach out to the veterans? Like for us, for the IBW, we have a direct entry for people coming out of the military. The chamber has a military council. Like, how do we outreach to the veterans groups? Because I'm assuming aircraft mechanics, Air Force.
Yeah, we do have some former military working in our maintenance department.
Yeah, I'd assume so.
And things. But in terms of an actual pipeline or connection, Todd, I don't know if we have anything.
That's a good.
That might be something for the chamber, frankly. We do have a military council.
Yeah.
That's actually a really good idea. I don't think we do.
It just sparked something I was thinking about.
That's a great idea.
Thank you.
No problem.
Nothing from me for the committee. I'll present the legal services report to the full board next week.
Thank you. Seeing nothing else, I'll take a motion for adjournment.
Motion.
Great. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I finished just in time.
No, thank you.
Have a great Thanksgiving.
That was enough.
Well, that was Colin.
That was enough. So how long, you made a comment, how long till it's gonna say Mark on it?
Oh, yeah.
Should wait till it's